across Texas. The issue is.
I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas.
I'm Greg Grugan in Houston.
I'm Rudy Koski in Austin, and this is Texas, The Issue Is.
Well, Happy New Year from the Fox Texas Trio. We are just a couple of weeks away from President-elect Donald Trump being sworn in as president again. I spoke to two members from North Texas in the new Congress about the new administration. New year, new Congress. Republicans control the White House, Senate, and have a slim majority in the House. I talked to Republican Congresswoman Beth Duyne from Irving and Democrat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from Dallas.
My biggest concerns are around the types of executive orders that he may issue. I think as it relates to laws and the laws being changed, I think that we won't necessarily see anything happen too fast. We know that walking into this 119th Congress, we have there is a slimmer majority for the Republicans than they had in the 118th. And we know that the House was the reason that we were the most unproductive Congress in the history of Congresses. So I don't really know that legislation will be the biggest concern, at least for this first half of his term.
We've got a lot of work to do. The concerns I have is I want to make sure that we're cutting spending. I want to make sure that we're responsive to the voters. And I think they were very clear about two things that are bothering them. And that's actually our border security and how it is creeping into crime being committed in our communities. And I think it's the economy. It's concerns about inflation, rising costs. They want to make sure that there's job opportunities, and they want to make sure that there's economic growth.
Do you think President-elect Trump's promise of mass deportation, is that realistic? Will that realistically happen?
I would hope that you get Tom Homan on your show at some point or listen to some of his interviews. And he's got ideas. I mean, they definitely have a pathway forward to doing that. There's a strategy. And as you know, when I was, local elected official in Irving, Texas, we had a great relationship with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We partnered with them. And I think it's looking at those cities that are willing to work with federal law enforcement and partnering with them, whether or not it's a 287G program or it's a CAP 24/7 program, which is what we created in Irving. It's having that relationship with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It is targeting criminal illegal aliens because they pose the most immediate threat to your communities.
The first term, he talked about building the wall. This time, he talked about shipping people out. But I think that people are starting to recognize that the gig is up, that Trump, along with his billionaire buddies, who he is lacing his entire administration with, that they rely on immigrants consistently. And the reality is that this entire country benefits from immigration. Now, does that mean that there aren't fixes that need to be made? Absolutely not, because there are no systems that are perfect.
Do you think the tariff talk from President-elect Trump is all talk, or do you think he'll actually follow through on those?
I need, most of us to understand that we don't exist on an island by ourselves, floating in the United States. We actually are a huge world economy. And so those tariffs will hit us really hard.
I think it's a very strong negotiating tool. And as you've seen, you've got, world leaders from around the world who have, last 4 years basically turned their backs on America, ignored, any kind of leadership role that they thought we ever had, are now coming to the table before President Trump is even sworn in.
President-elect Trump said that he would either pardon or commute, I don't want to misquote him, sentences for those convicted from January 6th. Do you support that?
I think anybody who actually committed a crime and who defaced public property in the way that they did, if anybody assaulted an officer or others, they should be held accountable. If we have people who are being held as political prisoners simply because one party was trying to make a political statement, which in many cases it would seem that was the case, then absolutely it should happen.
Trump is absolutely going to pardon January 6ers. Now, that is one promise that I think he will fulfill. As we know, during his first administration, he was consistently pardoning those that were closest to him and had shown their loyalty to them.
My word is challenges. Greg, what is your word?
Stephen, Texans need to strap in for my word, which is blast off.
All right, Rudy, your first word of 2025.
Well, I was initially thinking obstruction, but I'm going to go with gnashing.
Weeping and gnashing of teeth. All right, the Fox Texas Trio will be right back after this break. Welcome back. New Congress, new occupant in the White House soon. Greg, what do you think the first 100 days of a Trump administration will look like?
Stephen, I suspect we will see a blitzkrieg of campaign promise fulfillments via executive order. Full or partial rollbacks of Biden administration policies, including that controversial pause on natural gas exportation facilities and a whole range of regulations restricting the oil patch, including a Trump-led long shot attempt to resuscitate the massive Keystone XL pipeline spiked by Joe Biden in 2021. Also, we are almost certain to see a flurry of pardons and commutations related to the January 6th storming of the nation's capital, with, as Congresswoman Van Duyne suggested, exceptions made for the most egregious violent offenders. And I think it's completely fair to point out the outgoing president stripped his party of any moral high ground here by granting his felonious son Hunter a blanket pardon. Finally, cabinet confirmation hearings in the Senate will draw plenty of coverage, with Democrats looking to torpedo the president-elect's most controversial picks, or at the very least, muddy them up on the national stage.
Rudy, will there be a lack of fireworks in Trump's first 100 days?
Yeah, Stephen, I agree with Greg there. One of the first things I think that will go on Friday, the Biden administration, the Department of Energy folks, his group, announced that they're doing some kind of DEI, getting the Texas and Louisiana ready to shift away from oil and gas. That's not going to happen. That group is going to be the first thing to go. So sure, we're going to see a lot of fireworks. Katy Perry's going to have to write a new lyric, stanza or two or three or four with all the fireworks. But I think that there's going to be a lot of political teeth grinding. Republicans, they want sweeping reforms, and they will be gnashing their teeth over anything that looks close to a compromise, I think. Democrats will continue to grind and complain about any Trump proposal or action by a Trump appointee, which is why my word originally was obstruction, and I went with gnashing. Both sides are playing for the midterms, and control of Congress. Let's don't forget that. But most analysts say the pressure is going to be on the Republicans. The GOP, their to-do list, it doesn't necessarily have to be done in 100 days, but a bulk needs to be done by the summer of 2026. Any Republican not on that Trump train, they can expect to be labeled as a rhino and face a primary push back by party leaders, like what's happening right here in Texas. Stephen?
Greg, the last time Trump was the president, Mexico would pay for the wall. That didn't happen. Is the border, is Trump's promise more talk, or do you think this will be different?
Stephen, it depends on how you define mass deportation. The most hawkish estimates place the number of undocumented in this country at around 17 million. Almost no one I talk to believes removing all or even half is remotely practical or even feasible. What I'm hearing is that ICE and the Trump Justice Department will focus heavily on immigrant gang members with criminal histories and those who have somehow broken the law here. That could take a year or more, and by then all the trade groups and agricultural associations will have made the economic case for some degree of tolerance for those already here. Remember, none of this is cheap. Multiple cost estimates of running a single alien running them back to their country run in the neighborhood of $12,000 to $15,000 per person. So whether it's 1 million or 5 million expulsions, the American taxpayer is looking at a big bill.
Rudy, you have the last word shortly.
The effort to get Mexico to pay for the wall, that was sidetracked by the walls put up by the Democrats. Got to remember that. Crockett conveniently didn't mention that because they don't want voters to remember that. I expect Democrats will open up an old playbook again with lawsuits to obstruct any effort to deport any undocumented migrant. Stephen?
All right, that's all the time we have to see this episode or any of our past ones. Go to our station's YouTube channels.
And keep the conversation going on social media.
Next week, we'll talk about the new legislative session. It kicks off later this month. And don't forget to let us know what the issue is.